Blessed Our Love. Even in the morning when I rise, I say, God, blessed our love.
And I want to invite you to another episode of Beyond the Surface Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Wanda J. Evans-Brewer, and we have a special show. You guys had the questions, we've got the answers. We have Apostle and Evangelist Brown back to address questions from Proverbs 31. This is a follow-up podcast. Several of you texted me and emailed me and had specific questions after you listened to the podcast, so we definitely wanted to give them an opportunity to come back and address them. And we're going to start this discussion now. Apostle,
Amen.
Evangelist, welcome.
Thank you so much for having us again.
Okay, I couldn't wait. All right, so you saw that the questions came in.
Yes.
And so that you see that the need is large, is plentiful for information about how to not only be a virtuous woman, but also you raised the bar by saying that the man needed to be virtuous.
Yes, most sure.
And several people said to me they didn't have that expectation, that they thought sort of because the proverb really focuses on the woman, that somehow the man would be deleted from that. Well, let's start. One of the first questions that came in to me was about your comments about being equally yoked. And the question was, Candace Williams said, well, you know, the bottom line is, who determines which of the partners are equally yoked, since God is the person that knows our hearts?
Amen. I think she answered her own question at the end. God knows the heart. But Amos 3:3 said, how can two walk together? That's an agreement. You have to be in agreement when a person that's not in agreement are unequally yoked. And a person don't understand what a yoke is a wooden device that yokes two ox together. And I'm trying to make it clear. So if an ox is like 200 pounds, the other ox weighs like 20 pounds, then you got an uneven balance.
Okay.
And they're going to be pulling apart. So the Bible talked about being equally yoked, because when the ox is pulling, if one pulling one way, one pulling the other way, then you have unequally balanced, which that's where you get unequally yoked from. So Amos 3:3 said, how can two walk together less in agreement? You have to be in agreement. You have to be in agreement. And a believer, the Bible talks about not being unequally yoked, but unbeliever. So what happens is, a lot of times when you unequally yoked with an unbeliever, you find yourself pulling away from God. Most likely they're going to pull you away from God, opposed to pull you to God.
Okay.
And I saw that a lot. For instance, me and my wife was at a church. This young lady, she was in Christ. I mean, she was on fire for God. Then she met this young man. Mm-hmm. He wasn't in church. But she married him, and she pulled him, and he pulled her out of church. And that's what I mean by you got to be equally yoked. Mm-hmm. So
I think what it is that, excuse me, a lot of times women in general will see someone, and they say men are visual, but so are women.
Okay.
And they see this person, and they think he's the one.
Okay.
And in my own situation, I can say I've been through some similar to that, where the gentleman that I was dating before I met my husband, he did not believe in God at all.
Okay.
And every time I was planning to go to church, he would make sure that he would keep me out late on Saturday night, so I would just be
He's a
worn
saboteur.
out. Yes, just worn out. And he finally said to me that he did not want a woman that went to church all the time because she would be too holy. And when I say the red flags went up immediately, because now I realized, as I was going to church, that he was doing everything else to sabotage my relationship with Christ, which also let me know who he was serving. So I ceased that relationship. But when a team is not evenly yoked, you're going to be uneven. Mm-hmm. The team is not going to be able to accomplish what they're supposed to accomplish, and that's why we're able to do a lot of things that we do, because we're equally yoked.
And that's interesting, because what the apostle said was there has to be agreement.
Yes.
And so what you're highlighting is the fact that there was no agreement between you and he.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Not.
All right. Well, it's something that weighs heavy on a lot of people, because they feel like sometimes the unequally yoked piece almost feels like judgment. Mm-hmm. You know, like, oh, you're not good enough to be with me, you know. But you're saying that, no, it's really about the like-mindedness
yes,
as you go forward in faith.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, All right. Well, what does it mean to be virtuous? I had a young man, LeBrandon Hickey, who did not understand literally the term virtuous. He said, he was speaking. I had no idea what that was.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's to be practice moral duties. Other words, sustaining from certain device, fornication, adultery, and other sexual morality, because the Bible talks about that. And people say, well, you really shouldn't bring the Bible, but you have to, because the Bible is our guiding point.
Okay.
And the Bible talks about a moral duty. And the moral duty of the person abstains from certain devices, like I say, fornication, adultery, and other things that would cause you to be immoral.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Bible talks about sexual morality. The Bible says, out of all sin, sexual morality is the only sin that we commit within ourselves. With ourselves, because when you're doing sexual morality, you commit sin against yourself. But every other sin is outside the body. Mm-hmm. So I would say a person that practices moral duty, and obligation to God, and sustaining from certain devices.
That's interesting that you say that sexual immorality is an act against yourself, which explains why most strippers or people in the porn industry tend to be addicts. Mm-hmm. They need to anesthetize at some point. When you end up being sexual with someone and it doesn't lead any place and you have expectations of something grander, there's a depression that comes on the spirit that you just feel bad, mistreated, used, even if you enjoyed the encounter. So that's interesting. So why, if it is an attack on the self, then what's happening with us that we're still driven to hurt? It's like we're hurting ourselves purposely?
I don't think it's perfect. I think people don't realize when I talk about sin feel good. Temptation is a good feeling. It's an appetite for something you desire. Okay. But sex is created by God within the institution of the marriage. But when the enemy he perverted that and called it all kind of other sexual morality for pornography and all the other stuff that came about. And so, I guess, it's a thing that we have to be mindful of, because it feels good. Sin feels good. The bottom line, it feels good. We do things that we desire to want to have,
Okay, just to and I noticed that you use the term perversion, to a perverse level or to an excess in a way that becomes uncontrollable. We're not in the driver's seat anymore.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. All right. It was interesting. One of the things he said was he was curious in terms of your coupleship. How do you deal with a woman's past? He didn't really understand that, because some of what's happening in out in the world is people get in coupleships and they sort of penalize the other person for having had a past, for having been in previous relationships or come from some sort of inappropriate behavior, whatever. He says, okay, you're saying virtuous now. We're moving forward. I think I see you a diamond in the rough. How do you, as a man, get past a woman's past? Because he's acknowledging there is a true double standard.
I think we forget that we have a past too. And we all have a past. Like I said, I had a past before I met her. I think people think you're automatically saved, and I had to come to Christ like everybody else. And just like she had a past, I had some things that I had to deal with. But I said before that God had to deal with me before I met her, and so I was able to help her with some things. I was able to pray with her. I was able to counsel her just like I would anybody else. Okay. And I think we forget as a married couple that we are able. If we are able, we should counsel one another. We should pray for one another. And I was willing to listen to her and understand that she had an unforgiving spirit and pray for that. And when she forgave this individual, she left room for God to heal her. And that's what people don't leave room for God to heal. When you forgive someone, you leave room for God to heal that individual. Now, it doesn't say negate the law that says sexual morality is wrong in God and also man, that he should be punished for that. But still, in her mind, her heart, she had to forgive the individual to move on with her life and look for God to heal her.
Right. And I noticed that he had mentioned about me as well.
Right.
And what I will say to him is that it's no secret, even from our last conversation, that I lived a life of sin before I met him, and a lot of the issues that I was dealing with stemmed from my molestation when I was a young person. When I say young, I mean very young. And you don't have anyone to talk to, so you have all this stuff that's just inside of you. And I spent a lot of my years of my life angry. And when I say angry, I mean like brutally angry. It was a normal emotion for me. And from all of that, you begin to.
Oh, it's terrible for that to be just.
Yeah, that's
constant.
it was constant, and I lacked self-esteem, and there was no one to help change that. Mm-hmm. So the things that I was dealing with all stem from that, and I was with a lot of people that were not my husband. Mm-hmm. And what I will say to women in reference to that is anytime that you're sleeping with a man that is not your husband, you're going to take on his spirit. Mm-hmm. You can try to deny it as much as you want to, but you will. If he's a whoremonger, a liar, a cheater, that spirit is going to dwell within you. And I'll explain it the best way I can so they understand. When a man deposits in you, you're receiving his spirit. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the only way to remove that spirit from you is, first of all, go to God and purge yourself. And that mm-hmm. means sustain for any sexual activity, anything that will cause you to be vulnerable to sleep with another person. Mm-hmm. You got to release that and allow God to heal your spirit and mend it back together. And until then, you're going to keep going through that same cycle of sleeping with somebody, thinking he's the one, picking up these spirits, and the more you do it, you're going to take on every spirit that they have, and it's not something that's easy to get rid of. So
you're actually answering one of the other questions, which came from Contessa, which was, how did you manage that your desires as a woman? How did you control that while you were dating the apostle? Because by that time you're starting another journey.
Right. By the time I met him, I was purged from that situation. But what I will tell you, he was not lenient on me when he met me. He said ground rules from day one. Now, mind you, I had been...
No, he didn't come in with ground rules.
Yes, he did. He told me. We had a really wonderful conversation, and he said to me, he needed to set some rules for our relationship because he kind of knew some of the things that I had experienced. He saw God had revealed some things to him before we had this conversation. Okay. He said he was going to have his own place. I was going to have my own place. We were going to sustain from sexual contact. We weren't even going to talk about it. We were whoever I might have been sleeping with at the time, that was done and over with. If I thought about it, don't do it anymore. And everything that I was doing that was not of God before I met him, I need to stop doing it. So
he came in and regulated.
Listen. He literally just he laid it all out.
Okay.
And I couldn't find fault for that. Because
I actually like that.
Yeah, because I thought, okay, he knows exactly what he wants. Mm-hmm. He's not going to deviate from it. And if I saw what I liked and I enjoyed the conversation, which I really did, because we would talk 3 hours every single day, never discussed the same thing twice. Mm-hmm. And then we started having Bible study over the phone. So,
it don't get no more regulated than that.
Yes, and it was intense Bible study. It wasn't just like we go over a few scriptures. It was intense Bible study. And I appreciate that because I started thinking about, the man that was before him that I call him the smooth operator. Okay. Because he's like the serpent for Eve, you know what I mean? The serpent said what Eve needed to hear in order for her to turn on Adam. Okay. So not him, but the guy before him. Yeah. So this guy was a smooth operator. Okay. So I thought, well, wow, listen to this. He's not saying the same thing other guys would say to me. He wasn't coming to me with, hey, baby, how you doing? It was none of that. Okay. It was like, how you doing, sister? How you doing, sister? How's your day, sister? And at first, I wouldn't even speak to him. Because I had so much anger in me.
No, you didn't go dumb blind.
Listen, I would sit there and he would talk to me and I would do, the sister name. I was like, I don't know why he's speaking to me. Why he keeps speaking to me. But he said he saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself.
My listeners can't see her roll her neck. The way she rolled her neck.
I still got a little bit.
He ain't had no business saying nothing to her. But go ahead.
But it was wonderful. It was just, the other guy was a smooth operator. Okay. But he was, my husband was the man that was controlling my destiny through God. Mm-hmm. He knew just how to guide me in the right direction to get me where God was trying to take me to. Okay. And that's what I really like.
And that's a good answer for virtue. It's setting boundaries. And that's important that people know that. And abstain, that's another issue. You have to be able to say,
okay,
abstain. That's part of virtuous.
And that is a challenge. Setting boundaries.
It can be done.
Well, it is done. Apparently, that's why you all are sitting here. It can be done.
Yes, it can.
You said setting boundaries and healthy boundaries in particular, and then abstaining. Wow. So almost everyone said, okay, how do you, once you've had that rite of passage and you've awakened your sexuality, how do you go back to a position of abstaining?
You have to let God purge you. You
Okay.
have to go through a
Absolutely.
purification process. That's what I told you about that 6 year. I went through a purification process because when you have encountered different partners, and if you haven't been purified, you bring it into your marriage, you bring
Yeah,
a
you
different
do.
spirit, and you start comparing sex you had with Paul and
Joe.
Joe and all, you know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
And you begin to compare that. If you don't purge yourself from that, it become a problem in your marriage, serious
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, and that was part of what one of the questions that came through. She said, I was able to understand, well, actually this is more of a statement. She said, I was able to understand the way you act in your singleness
That's what. Yeah.
will basically reflect how you function in your marriage.
Exactly.
How long then? Okay, you're describing a purging process, and there is a process in dating where we are collecting spirits because we're binding with them. Okay. In general, because people always want to just have an idea. What does that look like? A year, 2, 3, or is it all individual based off your
based
walk?
on the individual walk because it took me 6 years.
And this is you working diligently, or you started off the first couple of years kind of playing, or
No. I mean, it was 6 years straight.
Where you just was diligent.
Yeah, and it kind of renewed what God had really put in me at the beginning because you waste a lot of energy and a lot of strength. I think people don't realize when you're out there and you have multi-partners, it becomes a drain on you, for sexual. And when you encounter your wife, you don't have a lot of time the drive that you have when you're in the world. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. And in fact, even my husband, who I told you at one point, described himself as having been a whoremonger or whatever. He said like it just got old, and many of the men that I sat down with said the same thing. Like it wasn't that, it wasn't that they didn't have some sort of pleasure from it, but it just was an emptying pleasure. It's like nothing's left.
Exactly.
And he has said like, I'm have no intention of dismantling my marriage, but he has said if we were to, he said I don't want to be out there. I don't want to go through that anymore. And I found that so interesting because there's a huge push to culture little boys. I mean, there's they tell girls to abstain, but they really there's a huge push to culture little boys. To really just the next one and the next one, and if you ain't had 10, you ain't had nothing, and hit these numbers. And so with that, if men who have a relationship with the Lord in whatever stage is in, if they know there's an emptying process to it, why don't they warn their sons?
Well, it's a void that you're trying to fill, and it's an ego thing, where you teach your son get experience because we believe that we have to have experience for our wife when she comes along. A lot of the time now, the women are more experienced sometimes than the men.
Yeah,
and so it's equal playing ground now, where it was the man out playing all the time. Now it's the women and the men. So I think I don't know why we don't teach our boys that because abstinence is so important because it's a lot of consequences come with that. I'm talking about diseases, pregnancy. I met guys that had a baby out of wedlock and they got married, but they brought the other family into marriage. They were paying child support and dealing with the mama's baby drunk.
And that was one of your questions.
And that's
how it was. Did you face co-parenting? Did either of you all have children prior to? And how did you manage co-parenting? Because you're absolutely right. Merging these families, especially when it's 3-4 different women, it's a huge challenge.
I think if it was smaller children, it's actually going to be an issue. But if you have adult children, it's really not because they're grown and you don't have to deal with that stuff. But what I would tell anybody that's co-parenting, stop thinking about yourself. Don't be so selfish. It is about the child. So what you need to do is sit down with the other parents. You all need to sit down and agree that you're going to disagree.
Okay.
And say, okay, I know that I really don't like him, and I know he knows he really don't like her, and that's okay. You don't have to like each other. But what you do have to do is have enough love for that child to say, you know what, we're going to put our differences aside to decide what is best for Junior or Sarah, whoever it is, we're going to do what's best for them. Let's sit down and come up with a game plan. Okay, this is how we want to discipline. This is how we want to do this. This is how we want to do that. And as long as you can get everybody on board to say it's not about us, everything can work out. It's when she's still mad at him because he's with her, and you bring that anger toward each other into the situation, relationship with the child, and the child is the one that suffers.
So what do you do when because what you're expressing is that you have a reason. All parties are logical and reasonable in thinking. Oftentimes you have a mature coupleship, and then you have immature folks. What is your advice when basically you just have an ill-spirited woman or ill-spirited man? Well, that's really not a possibility, but there's still a child involved.
That's where counseling is going to come in.
Okay.
They're going to have to seek counseling, because you cannot continue to have this fight against each other when you have a small child or a young child in the middle. There's no way that child is going to come out of that situation unscarred. So counseling is probably going to be the best issue for them to deal with it, or otherwise it's just going to be a disastrous situation, not for the parents, but for that child.
And when you say counseling, you're also considering lay counseling as well as spiritual counseling, as well as therapeutic, if necessary. Okay, because in general in the Black community,
That's not
counseling is just like
when you say counseling, I don't need no counseling.
In many situations
really
it's much needed, but lay counseling, I respect lay counseling as much as I respect spiritual counseling and therapeutic. But you do have to put some work in there.
Absolutely.
There was a question about do you believe what works to keep this marriage strong is really in many ways a template, that it works to keep. It can work to help a troubled marriage, that it can help other marriages.
Sure, God word is standard for everybody. When I say God word, it's just a principle that we talk about a family that pray together and study together, they study together. That's the first key, and the most important is communication. You have to communicate with one another. You have to be honest with one another. And what I have to learn with my wife, that I shouldn't be so quick to respond when she says something. I think when we react without thinking, that's a dangerous thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it could work for anybody, but God have to be the center. I say that because He had to be the center of our marriage, because so much temptation out there. Think about that. If you can't,
and all of it's not sexual.
No, it's not. Some is not sexual.
Yeah,
I mean,
just
it could be a conversation, like
Yeah.
you said. We got all these devices now. You got the cell phone, you got all the other stuff, where it could be the devil's playground. It's other ways to cheat other than physically cheat.
Well, I think they're describing it now as emotional cheating, where you're spilling your heart, your sadness, your issues to another, but you come in and play like nothing's wrong with your spouse. LeBrandon asked about prayer, and I'm always because he's 25, black male, trying to get it right. He said, "What does that look like?" He really didn't quite understand. What does it mean when you say pray together? What does that do?
Well, what it does, it keeps your marriage together, and also it allows you to become close as a couple, and that's key, because you think about it when you're in a heated argument. You ever been in a heated argument, then you watch a movie, and before you know, both of y'all forgot about the argument. That's what prayer does. The same thing. When you communicate to God, God is like the mediator between you and that person, and when you allow God to be mediated, what happens is you take authority over your marriage, and that's important, because believe it or not. It's a lot of people, just as well as people praying for your marriage, people praying against your marriage.
I know that.
You have to go to God in prayer, and you got to be able to defeat the enemy that's coming against your marriage.
So really, what you're talking about is stop looking just completely in this worldly realm, but understand that there is a real, true spiritual realm, and that things are at work there.
Can I share something with you?
Yes.
I heard a pastor say that he was fasting for a whole week. That the body of Christ, that people married would come together as one.
Okay.
And he was on the airplane, he's sitting next to this gentleman, and he was telling the gentleman about that. And the gentleman said, "I'm praying too, I'm fasting too." He said, "Wow, that's great." He said, "But I'm fasting that the marriage be broken down." Just as you got people praying and fasting for your marriage, that's people praying to turn on your marriage. And I can say this, the most dangerous people is your family.
Yes,
those are the main ones that are praying against your marriage. And you have to go to God in prayer. Prayer is key. It's communication. And like I say, it brings you closer together. It's something that, it's an intimacy that you have with God and with your spouse that you can't explain it. But.
Okay.
What I've learned is a lot of times there's issues that's going on in your marriage that people don't know about. And people will seek things in order to destroy your relationship. So what you have to do is continue to pray, because prayer is a direct line to God. And what happens is God will always intervene on your behalf if you allow him to. And that's where prayer comes in.
Okay.
If you are one person is praying and the other person is not praying, guess what happens? There's only that one lot of communication. But what ends up happening when you're all praying together, your husband is hearing what's going on with you.
Right.
And he knows your innermost feelings that you're confessing to God. And 10 times out of 10 during that prayer, he's going to find out exactly what's been bothering you that you haven't totally shared with him. Because when the Holy Spirit begins to work in you, guess what? You just start to release everything.
Yes,
Yeah, you do.
Yes.
You release everything.
Chad and I took a marriage retreat. It was at the end of the first year. I said, okay, we've made it a year. It's been extremely beautifully challenging, irritating, and really let's just see if we can, let's take a pause.
Yes.
We can dismantle if you'd like, because but by that time we dealt with the alcoholism. We dealt with merging into this house, our families. He dealt with a lot of my temperament. I'm very much driven and a big dreamer and pushy and all of that's great. But it also can be bad if you start feeling like somebody's becoming your taskmaster, or they're disappointed with you a lot.
Right, exactly.
And so I said, hey, you might, so we did this marriage retreat, and one of the things they had us do, and it really did save our marriage, in many, many ways, because of the forced communication, was that they let us know your feelings are your feelings. You get to feel whatever you feel. That's how you feel. We can't rebuke that. But when you're expressing them, we had to agree to listen. We had, if we were arguing, we had to hold hands, what I absolutely loathed. I mean, because when I'm angry, I physically feel hot. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel hot. And I'm just like, I don't want to hold your hand. But he could do it. Because one of the qualities he has, and I said, this is why the Lord's trickery. He has a good sense of humor. Chet is a very, very forgiving spirit.
Wow.
Very forgiving.
That's rare.
And he has really good control of his tongue.
Wow.
So he'll stand there and it absolutely makes me madder that I'm trying.
He won't say a word.
He will not lock with me.
Right.
But and that's what they said. Like, like you begin to deflate because there's nobody I can't,
You can't argue with yourself,
Yeah,
really.
and it's boring.
Right.
So we had to hold hands. But what they required is that we dialogue. That each evening that we, whatever that issue is, that we agree to a time that we would just write each other a love letter. They call them love letters. So, and you set your writing prompt, whatever that prompt is, and you time it, 10 minutes, 10 and 10. And you're absolutely right that just us having to not immediately deal with it, calm down, come to understand the other person's point, trigger points, like, he's a nail biter, he's going to go through, 4 cigarettes in 10 minutes. And me, on the other hand, I can be a bit of a bull in a china shop. It takes me a minute to get there, but when I'm there, I could care less. I could care less. So, but it also all is hurtful. It all leaves such scars. So I see what you're saying in terms of the prayer. The final part of it is being able to pray together and recognize that actually even in some of these innocent ways we injure each other. So no, we don't have the big ones. There's no domestic violence. There's infidelity. There's no, I'm not pulling them out of gambling joints. It's none of that. But some of the hurtful things I've said have resonated, and it's as big as the big three. In his spirit. So it does make you pump the brakes.
It's going to be very controversial what I'm about to say. We counsel people, we tell them don't avoid an argument. Because when you avoid an argument, it make you hate one another. You begin to hate each other. But when you argue, don't argue with respect to one another. And because words hurt. They say sticks and stones break my bone. Word never hurt, but it's true. Words do hurt. And I tell you about women, they remember what you said 20 years ago. So I've been very mindful. We never avoid an argument. Get me right. We never avoid an argument. It's an argument, a very, as you want to say, conservative argument, however you want to put it. But we never disrespect one another. We never cuss each other out. We never say hurtful words. because sometimes you need to vent that out. You
Yeah.
know? And that's important that a couple understand. That's a form of communication too.
And our communication is extremely strong. And a lot of people will see us and they'll say, oh, they can't love each other that much. They can't talk that much. We drove from Texas to Chicago, from Chicago back to Texas, and we talked the whole way. There was no radio in between my naps, and I took a few.
Okay.
He did all the driving. I drove 1 hour. He drove 17. So I did my share.
You know
of the
you're a
drive.
punk.
Right, absolutely. And I will claim that right now. Yes.
I drove. Then she gonna mention herself first. I drove 1 hour, and he drove 17. Okay,
exactly. But we talked the whole way, and it was very beneficial. And I tell people, you don't know how much him and I have had conversation, but communication was the key to our marriage.
You get through a lot of stuff
and prayer.
Mm-hmm. You get through a lot of stuff. Okay, so then you answered the question. Before I even asked it, which is, several people wanted to know, did you counsel other couples? Have you counseled other couples? And what was the other one? It was, what happens if other married couples who agree with you about the stepping stones? Because people were really, and Brandon mentioned that, just being shocked to hear you say wife first, and then the kids, husband first, and then the kids. What happens when people agree with that, and they're unbelievers? They don't quite want necessarily God in the middle of that.
Well, I think you got to put in perspective, like we talked about God, Jesus, man, the woman, and kids. And when I say I don't put them before my wife, because I'm gonna tell you this, it's true. It's very true. You find an unhappy woman in the home, and everybody unhappy.
Yeah.
But if you make her happy, then the kids are going to be happy. The husband's going to be happy. See, there's a certain need that she have to have that my kids don't have to have, and that makes sense. And so I got to cater to her need in order for her to get a need to our kids also. And so,
but I think, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think where it might have been a little misconstrued about what he was saying. Anything that our children need, they are provided with that. But sometimes you have to put their wants aside to take care of the needs of the wife. And sometimes people look at that as, not making sense. But if you give your child everything they need and everything they want, and you don't give your wife anything, then she's going to have a problem. There's going to be tension in the household. So as long as everybody's needs are met, they're fine. He doesn't mean that if our children needed something that he wouldn't provide it.
Well, that's how the world does it, though.
Right.
And I think that was his fear.
Right.
Is that there are women who are in units with unholy men, and so they do put their children off. They do put the man first, but kids suffer. And so I'm glad you brought that clarity. That we're still getting back to the same stuff. If you're not, with someone virtuous, if you're not in a righteous relationship, then you.
But I have to say this to the ladies who are out there dating.
Yeah.
This also may be controversial. I will never be dating a man and put that man before my children. I'm just not going to do it. If I'm married, then let's work as a unit. But there's no way a woman that is dating a man should ever put that man before her children.
And why do you say that?
Because he's
even
not
if he's a good man, even if he's a providing man,
if he's a good man, then marry me.
Okay.
Let's become one cohesive unit. Because here's the thing: he's here today, gone tomorrow.
Okay.
But your children are going to suffer from that. And there are a lot of women, I see it on TV all the time, where, I was with so-and-so, he said it was okay to leave him there, the baby there.
Right.
That is the most foolish thing I ever heard in my life. There's no man that's not my husband that is going to come before my kids. Now, when we get to be as one unit, then we will work together for the benefit of the family and the child. But there's no way a single woman should be putting any man that is not her husband before her child.
Okay, and some of it is, there's a misunderstanding about what marriage does. It's like, because there are various couples, kind of like the Angelina Jolies and Brad Pitts, who have longevity in relationships and say, or you have people who, pride themselves, well, I've been with him, 15 years. It's a common law marriage. The state acknowledges this. There's a misunderstanding that marriage actually sets the person apart. It says, of all the people on this earth, our spirits met, and I set you apart from any woman and from any man. Speak to the setting apart. Why Mary? When we live in a world where honestly you could give her the same things, y'all could exchange the same stuff, and never actually go into the covenant.
Yeah, because you just say covenant. It's
That's
a covenant with God.
Okay.
To death do us part, for richer, for better, for worse. And
Okay.
that's it. It's the covenant that you are not joined together as one. Because the Bible says when you become one, shall a man leave his mother and father, be joined to his own wife, and they should become one flesh. And it's important that we just talked about common law marriage. That's okay. It might be the law of the land, but it's not God's law. You see, it's not ordained by God. It's a difference.
So again, it's what you are following, what you decide that you're going to subscribe to. Okay, so one of the things that Nathaniel Jackson raised was nature versus. I love that, and believe me, we when he sent his stuff in. He sent so much stuff I didn't even have the energy to even. Okay, but he basically said, look, nature just wants to mate. It just wants to find. It doesn't have all this moral compass to it. What was your response to the things that he raised?
He's dealing with a world.
Spirituality.
He's dealing with spirituality, a world viewpoint.
Okay.
He said something that was I thought was an error. He said when a man found a woman. Behind every good man, the greater woman.
Okay,
and that's not true, because if we're equally yoked, and there's a divine order where God called a man to be the head of the house, but we equally for us humanity wise. So I don't understand what he meant when he said the woman is behind every good man, the greater woman. I didn't get that. So, but you have spirituality of religion. What religion said, you are ordained. God had ordained you and instruct you to do a certain thing.
Okay.
Religiosity means that I can be religious without having God and all the other stuff with it.
What's an example of religiosity? What does that look like?
Well, it's to obey God and obey God's commandment. God said, "Let every man have his own wife," and you honor that. And so, spiritualism said that you can have anybody you want as long as you plead the natural person, the flesh. Okay. So it's a different.
Well, what's a group like? What's a type of group that practices that?
Mormons, for instance.
Okay.
Yeah. Multi-wives. You can have multi-wives. So
okay.
That's pleading to the flesh. And that's spirituality where religion said that everyone have his own wife and let every woman have her own husband. That's a different.
Okay.
It's one thing, I tell people, it's one thing to observe the Word of God. Observation is to look at the Word of God and to interpret the Word of God. But interpretation and observation with application is no good. See, if you don't apply the biblical principle of your life, then it's really no good for its religion. Or
and you know what that makes me think about? Gandhi, who said, I love your Christ. I just don't like your Christians.
Exactly.
And that was his bump in the road with that. Interesting.
But I think too, what Nathaniel was speaking of, because I read some of his comments, and all I kept seeing was a person who reads a lot of horoscopes, who believes in the stars and the moons defining how he should feel for that day.
Okay.
When you are a person that's religious, as they would say, there's scriptures and things that you adhere to, and you apply that to your life, and that's how you conduct yourself according to the scriptures, the Word of God. A person who is spiritual, they believe in feeling good, but they don't want to give God the credit, so to speak, for them feeling that way. They want to say, well, the reason why I feel this way is because my horoscope said today I'm supposed to be upbeat and pretty and feeling just wonderful. And then I looked on this sign, and it says today, because of my zodiac sign, this cow, I'm going to see this cow in the sky, and it's going to make me feel good. It's everything about feeling good that does not apply to God. They don't give God the credit.
I didn't think he was trying to be that flimsy. I really felt like he was more or less trying to say that there's a natural drive for us to want to connect, and that the woman plays a larger role in that just by design. That in nature, she, what does the male have to do to get her? And he has to go over the top, beat his chest, walk hard, all these things, and that she actually gives him a place to place his burden. That, you know, because there's one comment where he said half of the man's burden.
Takes the burden, but that's not true because we cannot take each other's burden. Jesus said, "Come unto me, all your labor."
Okay.
I would take.
Oh, so you already see that in the error that she takes his burden, but rather Jesus is supposed to take. Oh, okay.
What she does, she come help fulfill you. She doesn't make you because nobody make us. We complete in Christ.
Okay.
See, when you take a person say, I had a half, and when she came, she was the other half. It's not true. Because it's God that completes you. And we cannot.
So many of us think like that. There are many people that believe that there's a life mate, a soul mate out there that will complete them. Right. And so that's why you feel like that's more sort of occultish, sort of, horoscope and spirituality.
Yeah, exactly.
Because what you're saying is that there is no completion without Christ, and that the true burden bearer is Christ. So then, what are we doing in the coupleship of one another? Are we just loving each other? We're exchanging pains. Are we ever carrying one another's burdens, or are we carrying them? Helping carry that load to Christ on behalf of the other person.
That's exactly.
1 Peter 5:7 says, "Cast all your cares upon Him, for He cares for you."
Okay.
And the problem is, we try to burden each other with our burden and become a burden within the marriage itself. That's what a yoke is. It's a burden. It weighs you down. That's what a yoke is.
But I think
Jesus said, I'm sorry. No, Jesus. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
They get
because you talk about this burden because it's important that we know that because Mark 11:28 says, Jesus said, "Come unto me, all you that labor and have burden." He said, "I'll give you rest." I would give you rest. Not a woman, not a man, but Jesus said, "I give you rest. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. And learn of me." And so that's what people fail to realize. I think a lot of times that's the problem in the marriage. We try to bury each other's burden, and it's too burdensome for us.
And I've done that. I've been definitely guilty of doing that. I'm going to fix this, and I can understand this, and
you think you can fix it, but really, what I used to do that. I used to think everything that he was going through, I got the answer. I could fix it. But the more I began to study the Word of God, what God wants me to do is, first of all, help him listen. And when he's not strong enough or mentally strong enough to carry that burden of Christ in prayer, that's my job. A woman should be able to pray for her husband. The husband should be able to pray for the wife. And I have no problems in laying hands on him and praying for him when he can't pray for himself. Because sometimes he is overwhelmed. And as his helpmeet and his wife, that's what I'm supposed to do, is pray for him.
Okay. Wow. You gave me a lot to think about. I hate when I'm doing these interviews and I get to thinking more than I'm actually interviewing. But it's really interesting hearing that and it's for a very loving reason that you attempt to carry the person's burden. And you're right, it does wear you down to the point, really you want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So you said that may be a very huge ingredient why two Christians, two people who are trying to be very like-minded, the one error that they're making, which gets back to what you're saying in the first place, which is that you want that the power of the covenant is Christ himself, that he is literally in the center of that.
And that goes back to what we just said at the beginning, talking about being unequally yoked. And I was talking about that, how you got a yoke is a burden. And if y'all trying to carry that yoke, guess what? The marriage is going to fail. And you cannot carry us too burdensome,
Wow.
And women have to understand that though we're not physically weaker, we're considered the weaker vessel.
Yes.
There's the reason why God put man ahead of the woman.
Okay.
Because of the strength of him as a man physically right, and he has the ability to block anything that might be harmful to the family and the children.
Well, he's protected first.
His arms, and I look at it this way. When Adam was created, God decided to take a rib from Adam to create woman. The ribs are placed under his arm. This man's arm is my protection. So when I'm under his arm, I know, coming from under his arm, I know that there's protection there. So whenever I need something, there's no need for me to try to fight a battle by myself. There's no need to, because I have my strength right here, because I know he's a man of God. So when I need strength that I don't have on my own, which being the weaker vessel, it's on him to protect the family. And that means spiritually emotionally and physically.
And that kind of gets back to something that Nathaniel gave me an assignment to look at National Geographic, to just kind of look at it. And so, I was being funny, but I was like, I just finished Lion King. Does that count? He was like, no.
According to Nathaniel,
So, no, he didn't accept it at all. And I did actually start the process. I'm going to call him up and tell him what I came up with. But it was just interesting seeing how dominant the male, even the gorilla, like he lays around, he ain't doing nothing. A couple of the females come pick bugs off of him, but when it's time to fight, and the same thing with the lion. Like a lot of what he showed me, and not that the women don't, they get up there too, but there really is a naturalness to the male being protector and leader first. I, also going back to the spiritual. Chet is like 14 months sober, and I went into which I that's not my struggle. So I went into spiritual sobriety with him. I decided, even my little glass of Chablis that I would have on a Friday night when Gia Boo was asleep, I said, okay. I'm not going to have anything. I'm just gonna be his support, because this is such a yoke for him that I'm going to stand in spiritual sobriety with him. So I've had a couple of challenges with people like, oh girl, we're having a spaghetti dinner, you want some wine? Like, no, I'm in spiritual sobriety with my husband. And it's interesting how people just are sort of like irritated with it, like,
exactly.
You don't even have it. Why? I said, because this is hard for him. The amazing thing about doing it, and it's been a challenge, believe it or not, even though I don't suffer from alcohol issues, is that when I want a glass of wine, I really want it. And I think about it and meditate on it, and I said, is that what he's going through? That's how hard that is. And it's made my heart so soft for him. And he's told me, he's released me. He's like, wine, you cool. You don't have to do that. I said, no, because I really, as your wife, I don't want to get snooty. I don't want to get so arrogant as to feel like, oh, this isn't hard. Oh my God, it's hard. It's hard because I know what that's like to go get sushi or, and want some sake. I know what that's like to have an excellent Italian dish and is complimented with a Chablis. I know, and I'm abstaining from that to keep him strong. To keep him strong. So I'm sharing that to say that you've talked a lot about that spiritual realm and the power of it, what we use from it, or basically choose not to use from it. What do you want to tell people as we wrap up? I think we hit all our questions. I'm not sure.
I think so. I think it was a question that Chad asked that
yes, that's an important one.
You were the virtuous woman when he met you, and he said he saw a light about you. He said he found you. So he was in line with God. You didn't find him; he found you.
Absolutely.
See, there was a light that God wanted all of us to come to the light.
Mad, he sure did find me, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yes.
Too mad.
But
He's in line with the word, though. He's in line with the word.
Yes, he was in line because he found you. Because let me say something. God never turned down us when we looking at he was darkness looking at the light. So
even when you're unvirtuous,
yes.
if you begin to look toward the light.
It wasn't, he wasn't a virtuous man looking for an unvirtuous woman, right?
Okay.
You found him. He didn't find you. Because he saw the light. He saw the light in you. And so he saw that the God was in you. And so he walked to the light. And so he was in the line with God. I mean, and that explained that because...
So that's less about unequally yoking and respecting the work of the Lord as he maneuvers people in your life.
Exactly.
Wow.
Plus I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Angela.
What I was going to say is that we were talking about that, and one of the things he brought to me was you being the virtuous Proverbs 31 woman that he saw. He saw
on crutches, by the way. I was on crutches,
but the light was still going.
Go ahead.
The light was still going, and he found you.
Yes.
So here's the thing: by him coming to you, being the virtuous Proverbs 31 woman, you sanctified him.
Yes, you
through that relationship, and your children will be sanctified because of that union.
And yes.
So there's some hope in.
Yes, it is.
Coupling. But you still have to bring the Lord in the middle of it. There has to be a consciousness of it.
But he has to have a consciousness of it in order to recognize the God in you.
Yes.
He would not have seen that unless there was something already there in him was for him to be able to recognize you.
Wow, so we
He
wrapping
was
up.
searching.
Knowing for sure that God is amazing. These people that flip my mind. We know that God is absolutely amazing, and
Yes,
that
he is.
so you're saying there's great potential for power in marriage,
Absolutely.
even as it's under, marriage is under tremendous attack.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
You saying there's potential for if people want to get in rightful alignment with the Lord.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Well,
Amen.
you've been listening to Beyond the Surface Radio with your host, Dr. Wanda J. Evans-Brewer. This is our follow-up to our Proverbs 31. I can't wait to hear your responses. For folks, yes, I did use your name. You know who I am. And until we chat again, be safe in God's grace.